know that the sandals on my feet or my feet are dirty because I've walked. I want to know, they didn't have deodorant, so I knew they weren't smelling too good. I want to know all of that experience. So I want you to put yourself in this. The woman said, "You're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan. How can you ask me for a drink?" Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and flocks and herds?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give him will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." He told her, "Go call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you've had 5 husbands, and the man you have now is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true. You have no husband, but you've had 5. And then I want to skip down a little bit, because what happened, we just talked about, have you met Jesus? My life changed the moment I met Jesus. And I didn't whisper it to my friends. I called my friends screaming, "Hey! I just met this man. He has changed my life." Can you imagine her meeting him face to face? Now, she didn't walk back to the town. She ran back. And if you go down a little bit further, John 4:39, many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. "He told me everything I ever did." They didn't believe him until she went back there screaming of what he had told her, that he knew everything she had ever done. He knew everything she had ever done, and guess what? He loved her anyway. He knew everything. See, I'm not qualified to stand in front of you by my own standards. I'm qualified because Jesus called me. Society even says I'm not qualified. Society don't want me to tell you what's happened in my life because, see, I was dirt, trash, I was a whore, a prostitute, and a dope fiend. The first time I was raped, I was 12. I learned how to read on the back of a prison uniform at 18 months old. I knew that TED was Ted. I had my first pimp at 15 years old, and it wasn't my choice. I thought it was my fault because I'd ran away. I don't know how many men have raped me. And when I say rape, I mean paid for sex with me. I can't tell you, only Jesus knows. So by society, and by the way, the first time I was incarcerated, I was 12. The first time I went to prison, I was 19. I've been to prison twice. So by man's standard, I am not qualified to stand in you, but by Jesus' standard, I am qualified. Because he called me and I said, "Yes, send me." And I was too young of a Christian to know that I could become well vomit and be like Jonah and say no and run the other direction. We'll have that discussion in just a minute. But I said, "Yes, send me." See, by what society says, I am not worthy of even being alive because man tried to kill me more than once. By my own hand, I should not be alive. I was training a group of nurses and EMTs, and I told them the amount of medication I took, and one of the EMTs stopped me in the middle of the training. She says, "Hold on, Tajuan. I'm trying to figure out how much Narcan I would have to give you just to get your heart to beat one time. And you took that much medication?" I said, "Yes." I was a psychiatric social worker at that time. I knew what I took to kill me. And I woke up 8 hours later. And this was before I knew Jesus. And he had purpose for me. So at 12 years old, I ran away. I'm not from Alabama. I'm from Georgia. And the very first time I ran away from Carrollton, Georgia, and wound up in Birmingham. I truly believe that God ordained me to be in Birmingham. And Birmingham is my home. Alabama is my home. And my life changed when I met the Lord. But I need to give you a little backstory. So yeah, Haley, I'm going to give some testimony. So I ran away at 12. The week before that, I had been raped for the first time by 3 boys. And because I didn't fight back and they had talked me into sex, I thought it was my fault. And I ran away because I got caught smoking at school, and I knew my mother was going to kill me. I'm my mother's only child. My father was in and out of prison. He actually died in prison 4 years ago for 2 counts of DUI manslaughter. It was pretty much a life sentence he had given, and he got sick and died in prison. But at 12 years old, I was raped, and my father wasn't in my life, and my mother was abusing me, and I had run away, and I knew she was going to kill me for getting caught smoking at school, or for smoking anyway. And I wound up in Birmingham. Well, the truck driver dropped us off at a group home, and the house parent came out and found there was one of the boys who had snuck out to smoke that lived in the group home, and the house parent came out and found not only the boy, but 2 girls. So she had 2 extra kids on her hand all of a sudden, and she figured out that we were runaways. During that time, there was not Amber Alerts or missing kids. Missing kids had to be missing for a very long time, and then they went on the side of a milk carton. I was just a delinquent and acting out. So I was not considered missing. Anyway, she figured out that we'd run away, called my mom. My mom came to get us because it was me and another girl that had run away, and took me back, and I met my first social worker. She was my probation officer. I had been pretty much put on probation the next morning. And she looked at me at 12 years old and said, "When's the last time you had sex?" And 12-year-olds can't consent to sex, first of all. Second of all, the week before I had been raped. So for her to ask me this a week later, I felt like something was wrong with me, that I was marked. Because how could she see this all of a sudden just the next week? How did she know this? And why was she asking me this? And so I told her the truth. It was the week before, and if you would have heard me a few years ago, I've actually got recordings of me speaking and saying I lost my virginity at 12, and that's not true. I was raped at 12. I could not consent to sex at 12 years old. And we could get into a whole conversation about consent and what age is appropriate and all that, and that's a discussion for another time. But at 12, I couldn't. And I thought that I was marked. And at the end of this interview, she proceeded to handcuff me at 12 and take me to juvenile jail for 72 hours to scare me straight. Now, it didn't scare me straight. It made me mad. It actually pissed me off, just to be honest. And I became even more belligerent, and I acted out even more. But what I do know now is, looking back then, that I was a child, that no one was looking at what was happening behind the scenes. They were reacting and looking at my behavior. And no one ever looked at what was going on in my life. They blamed me. Because see, I was smart. You got any educators in here? Anybody in schools? How about this? Let me tell you. All through grade school, I scored 99.8 or 99.9 percentile on all standardized tests. I was considered smart, and I was told I was smart, and so it was evidently my fault. It had to be my fault. So between 12 and 15, I ran away more times than I could count. I stopped counting, and I was blamed every single time. I was put in group homes, emergency shelters, locked up more times than, I don't even know the number of times I was put in juvenile jail. Foster homes, I only had one because foster parents did not want me. I actually heard a foster mom tell my social worker, "I will not take her into my home. She won't stay long enough for me to love her." No one wanted to take the time to love me. About 13 years old, they put me in a psych ward. I told you my age. There were not adolescent psychiatric wards during that time. I was put in an adult unit for 17 days so they could figure out what was wrong with me for a psychiatric evaluation. I'm not going to tell you what happened during that time, but I will tell you this. I needed treatment after that treatment, because I was in there with adult men that were psychiatric patients. This was a co-ed facility. At about 14 years old, I was standing in front of a juvenile probation judge, and he looked at me. He said, "You're incorrigible." And I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "There's no hope for you." There's a group home that I go to quite regularly, and I talk to the kids. I was actually there last week. I try to go there a couple of times a year because the foster kids change over. When I was there last year, I shared that, and a little girl looked at me and she said, "A judge told me that 2 weeks ago. There's no hope for her." And I looked at her and I said, "That judge is a total lie from the pit of hell. There's hope for you, baby. There's hope." So at about 15 years old, when I ran away the last time and I met my first pimp, did I know he was a pimp? Absolutely. I'd ran away enough. But my father wasn't in my life. Matter of fact, the first time I ever did dope, it was marijuana, was with my dad. I told him I wanted to try it, and he said, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it with me and not on the streets. I didn't like alcohol. He was a raging alcoholic. I told you he killed 2 people, DUI manslaughter, so alcohol wasn't ever anything I wanted, and up until this point, I didn't ever want to do drugs. When I met this pimp, he took me home to where him and the girls lived, and there were 4 girls there. 2 worked the streets and truck stops, and 2 worked strip clubs, and he had me doing something different. He had me selling drugs. And so I thought he loved me more because I didn't have to do what they did. And he's teaching me everything he thinks I need to know about cocaine, and every single day he's saying, don't do it, 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 don't do it. If he told me once, he told me 1,000 times, don't do it. If you ever do it, it's the worst thing you could ever do. And every night he's sending me out, and I have a quota to make, and he's giving me enough drugs to make the quota. And the other girls have quotas to make, and I see what happens when a girl doesn't make quota. Because your punishment doesn't happen in private, it happens in front of all the other girls. And your punishment can be anything from a rape, a beating, a torture, or a gang rape, whatever he decides. And by the way, this pimp was one of the nice ones. I had more than one pimp. This guy was nice, based on standards with the other pimps, just so you know. And one particular night, a few weeks later, he drops me off, gives me the drugs, and there's not enough drugs to make quota. The tables had turned. And I was 15. Did I physically submit to a man paying me for sex that night? Absolutely, I did. It was rape. It was not consensual sex. I was 15, first of all, and I couldn't consent to sex. I wasn't old enough. And second of all, it was paid rape is all it was. And trust me, I'm still in counseling. I will probably be in counseling to the day I die. I love my counselor, and she has changed my life. But I did not even want to understand or admit to my own victimization because that meant that somebody hurt me and I couldn't fix it. And as long as it was my fault, because that's what we're taught as women, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, dust yourself off, fall down 7 times, get up 8, and it's all going to be all right. And as long as it's your fault and you can fix it, then it's okay. And that moment that I had to realize that I was a victim, my life changed, and I didn't want to look at it. Matter of fact, it took me 3 more months to even begin talking about it. But I was a victim of society, I was a victim of circumstance, and I was a victim of, as a child. I was a child. And one of the things that we fail to, that we don't think about is Proverbs talks about the way you train up a child, they won't depart from it. That's not just positive. If all she's known is being abused, how are you going to expect her to accept anything else just because she turns 18? Or is everybody in here over 18? Or is there anybody in here under 18? Like I'm about to burst your bubble. When will you be 18, baby? How old are you? In 2 years? Okay, and when will you be 18? You're 14? Wow, you're gorgeous. Babies. We got babies in here. I need to watch my language. Did any of you have an epiphany on your 18th birthday, those of you who are over 18? Like you were financially secure, emotionally stable, and spiritually mature? I just want to know, I'm trying to meet that person. It's not going to happen, babies, just because y'all turned 18, okay? Sorry. But, and I love policy, and I understand we have to have a dividing line between child and adult. I get that, but just because someone turns 18, it doesn't mean it's their fault all of a sudden. If it's been going on for 10 years. You can't blame them. And we have got to stop as society because that's what happened to me. Because see, that pimp told me some truths. And we uphold it today. He told me I would be arrested and he would not. First time I was arrested for prostitution, I was 16 years old, booked into the jail, taken to the mattress room to get my mattress, and raped by the officer who took me in the mattress room. So now I couldn't trust police. That pimp told me that people would drive by me every single day and not reach out and help me. Every single day it happened. He told me I couldn't walk into a church with the clothing I had. My clothing, I didn't need underwear, that wasn't necessary. My clothing was pretty much spandex, mostly dresses and heels. And when I'm in a church or with a group from a church, I challenge you that if somebody walks through those doors and all she's got on is a spandex mini dress and high heel shoes, do not talk to her about the clothes she has on. Because she's got more courage in her little finger than you got in your whole body. You embrace her, you love her, you get to know her, and then you can talk to her about her clothes when you're taking her shopping. And until then, don't you say a word about her clothes. That pimp told me I could leave anytime I wanted to because I was not physically tied. This is not taken.